this is today's agenda. We're just going to have a little kind of, reprise of what we're doing for the project for the first half an hour and big picture overview. And then we're going to move on to really a very brief mention of waste characterization, because we covered that a great deal in the last session. And then we're going to get into diversion opportunities and programs presentation, and that's a lot of the meat of this. And then we're also going to start talking about the conceptual plan. But what does all that stuff mean? Well, we're about to get into that. Just to introduce the team, Dave Benink is the CEO of Reuse Consulting and our primary expert on reuse innovation centers. He's worked all over the place. 44 states, 14 countries, and the Virgin Islands. That's pretty cool. Okay, it looks like we lost Dave, and now he's coming back in. So I'm going to keep going and hope that this works. I'm the admin lead for Sustainable Hudson Valley, reporting to basically the project owner on our side, which is who's Melissa Everett, our executive director. The project goals. This project was commissioned by Ulster County because they wanted to divert more waste from going to landfills. And so we started working with them on it last fall. Ulster County's been a real leader in environmental concerns, having their own Department of the Environment, which is really amazing for a county to have. Repair Cafe was also born in Ulster County and has spread throughout the valley, and there's like 45 locations already. They have zero waste implementation plan they've been working on, and just are very committed. So we're hoping to enable them through the course of this project to have all of the tools they need and to actually have an actionable plan by the time we're done with the project later this year to take the next step and maybe issue an RFP and start, really creating a reuse innovation center.
So Barbara, I'm not a co-host anymore.
Okay. Okay, we'll just have to make do. Yeah, because I guess we lost you for a second. Are you okay now?
Yep.
Okay, great. So this is this little background. Initial planning study and strategic plan was funded by Ulster County Legislature. Yay, Ulster County. And we talked about the goals. And while it says goals of an RIC are maximize diversion opportunities, we also are interested in community participation, right? And there's more than you can get out of an RIC than just diversion opportunities, although that is the primary goal. And of course, why we're here today, robust stakeholder involvement throughout the project. We want to understand what this means to you, what you hope to get out of it, whether or not you think this will serve your needs. We want your feedback on this. That's the whole point. We want you to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, and we want to know what you think. This is an overall picture that I made of the whole process of the study. There are 6 major components in order. First, understand the waste stream by evaluating, all of the data from a lot of sources. And we really went into this in a lot of detail. We talked to a lot of stakeholders. Dave in particular talked to a lot of stakeholders in the county, businesses, government entities. And we reviewed a lot of data from reports from UCRA, reports from the state, the Zero Waste Implementation Plan, etc. there's a lot of data to look at to understand what the waste stream is that's specific to Ulster County. And out of that, we were able to then look at that information and identify diversion opportunities, how they can be done, what's not being done now that should be or that could be done more or better, and identify realistic reuse programs and business models. The next step that we've started now, which we'll get into today, as well as diversion, is to figure out, okay, based on the opportunities that we've identified for how to divert materials and what sorts of businesses or operations or programs might do so best in specifically within a reuse innovation center, what is the best model for that reuse innovation center? And there are different options for that and different ways that it's being done elsewhere. So we are starting to look into what's the best model for Ulster County, or what are the options and how might they work and what would it need? And that's where we are right now. As you can see, it says we are here. And then the next step and the subject of following sessions will be determining siting requirements in specific detail, and then finally finalize a workable plan for an RIC that's all encompassing of all that we've learned in the previous steps. Any questions on that? Okay. This is just one example model that Dave came up with, and I'll let him talk to you about this. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, thank you. So, okay, so we're just going to assume that there's a few new people on the phone. So we're going to start from the basics and go really quickly through it. But basically, the idea is this is my 31st year in the circular economy, and we, in the beginning, I started a reuse store, and then I later helped others start their reuse stores. And then I realized that it's very difficult to run a reuse store after doing it for years. And we decided on a different business model, which was the idea of a cooperative approach, where almost like a business cooperative, where you have different businesses that are working synergistically together. They don't compete with each other, they complete each other. And so you have some on the supply side and some on the demand side, but the whole focus is to attack the waste stream, find value in the waste stream, and turn that into profitable businesses. And one way to do that is for them to work together and help each other. And I needed to create a visual that would help you understand what was in my brain. So we had an architect create this as a model of what it could be. This isn't an existing building, so we just came up with, you know, squares and rectangles and things like that, so we could fill in what that would be like. You can see that it involves a lot of areas. A lot of the area is storage of materials that we're selling, but there's a recycling area. There's places where material is coming in, where it's going out. There's there are several workspaces, as you can see, where these micro businesses might be able to locate and create furniture or artwork or something like that. But I think we're really proud of the idea of having a repair station based inside the Reuse Innovation Center, where materials can be repaired. That would likely be right beside a tool library, where we could lend out tools for people to do other repairs. This entire operation is a great opportunity for job training, for workforce development, not only to develop their skills, but to point them in the direction of the circular economy, as opposed to just having them become part of the problem. We want them to become part of the solution. So the training is super important. And yeah, I guess we'll move on from there. That's a little overview. So, one of the things is that this isn't, our first rodeo. This is the 31st year, and we have 10 different reuse innovation center efforts going on across North America. It's very hard for me to keep up with all of them, but some of them are moving extremely slowly, so we don't need to worry about them on a daily basis. But everywhere I go, I don't assume that I have the solution. I don't want to just apply whatever solution we had in one location to your location. So what do? You talk to the stakeholders, you get to know people, you find out what the waste is like, you find out what the buildings are like, you find out what the roads are like, or whatever. Meaning like how do you get places, and where is a good place to put a reuse innovation center? So, you lay that groundwork of like, what about stakeholders? What about UCRA? UCRA, wow, what an amazing partner they have been. They've been so helpful in telling us like how things work, and they have such a huge percentage of the waste stream flowing through their facilities that we couldn't have a better partner, honestly, as far as finding out how waste works in Ulster County. So we definitely looked at data. We read, various reports and things like that we were coming across. And but I think one of the things we did, was like look at the diversion system that is in place now, and honor that, and say that, what, if it weren't for places like Habitat for Humanity and these thrift stores and things like that, the problem would be even worse. So when you think of the waste stream, you need to think of the entire waste stream. The waste stream includes everything, including the recycling stream. The recycling stream is just part of the waste stream that gets diverted before it becomes waste, okay? Before it's truly wasted. So let's move on. Next slide. So what are some of the observations that I came up with? I traveled there 2 or 3 times. I lost track actually how many times I've been there now. But hey, I got to work at the transfer station. I got to actually physically be at the transfer station, diverting materials, like those doors that you see in the lower right. There was a set of 3 doors. They were worth about $500. Somehow, even after being removed and transported and literally thrown onto the floor of the transfer station, they were still intact. And it just shows you that there are some gems in the waste stream. And yeah, like the picture shows, it often is hidden. It doesn't seem like there's value if you look at the upper right photo. And you're right, there isn't a lot of value in that photo. But our job is to try and divert that value in the beginning. Try and go for those type of materials. Try and catch them farther upstream before they end up in this disaster. So we did observe the waste stream. We found out kind of some of the materials that were flowing through the county and on their way to the landfill, right? We also saw places like on the left where there was Zamborski's, a place that is actively diverting materials from the waste stream, and lots of a variety of materials, but mainly building materials, and mainly antiques. And so we had found out that the C&D waste stream was a big part of the total waste stream. And of course, we found out what people were currently diverting as part of our work. So next slide. One of the things that these diagrams are really you know, you say, well, what is that representing? And really what you need to think of is that these lines are connecting the waste stream in Ulster County to a destination. Like, it doesn't mean that it was wasted. It means it was about to be wasted and then it got recycled. And when it got recycled, it traveled outside of Ulster County to a new location. And of course, the MSW, the true waste, that went to, most of that went to Seneca. So, so what is the point? I think one of the points is, you know, these are not circular. These lines do not create a circle, do they? They are a linear material flow line. And what we want are circles. We want materials that are created, and, you know, waste that's created in Ulster County travels to a business in Ulster County and is manufactured into something else and then is purchased in Ulster County, and that creates a circular pattern. So so this is what's happening now. Even though it's recycling, which is good, better than waste, we can do better than that. Next slide.
Okay, so one of the things that we want to point out is that repair is an important part of diversion. Repair Cafe, as I mentioned earlier, was born, at least, you know, in New York State, or in our Hudson Valley. It was born in Ulster County, and since then it has spread to, I believe, over 45 locations throughout the valley now. It's a bunch of volunteers that get together that, you know, have events, and once a month or once every 2 months, each Repair Cafe is a grassroots organization in a different spot, and it has its own schedule and its own rules. All of them are adminned by Susie Fromer, who works for Sustainable Hudson Valley, and they, you know, they fix all kinds of stuff for people that just bring them in, and they show you how to fix them, and it's such a positive experience for everybody who goes to these things. But repair, whether it's a Repair Cafe or whether it's somebody just fixing appliances, is keeping stuff out of the waste stream. So that's another important aspect that we want to be aware of. Any questions on any of that? I hope nobody's muted and trying to ask a question.
I have a question. This is Cynthia. Thank
Cynthia.
you so much for the overview. That was really helpful. I was wondering if, and no need to, you know, dive into this. I know we're short on time, but I was just wondering if, when you did all the auditing and of the waste stream in Ulster County, if textiles was something that you also noticed, or if you're interested in textile diversion as well.
Oh, we're absolutely interested in textiles. And I know there's been a significant interest in textiles of late. I know there's been a whole email thread with a lot of people, which I've only tangentially been on, but definitely that's one of the things that we evaluated. There is a link on our website, on Sustainable Hudson Valley website. There's a page for a Reuse Innovation Center, and you can read in detail the report on waste characterization on that page if you'd like to see more about it. But definitely textiles have been a subject of discussion, and there are different opportunities with textiles, right? You can go big, large scale. You can try to, you know, remanufacture stuff out of textiles. Or you can be a very small kind of boutique-y micro business, and, you know, like the Skirt Sisters that Dave has mentioned to me before. They take, you know, used clothing, and they make skirts out of them.
Yeah, damaged clothing, you know.
Damaged clothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so another thing that we have to factor in is there's an existing infrastructure in place in Ulster County, and especially, you know, like when it comes to textiles. Like, there are thrift stores and boutiques and things like that that sell those things. And so, and a whole network of secondhand stores. Hey, that's what I'm talking about now. So the point being that how do we help the existing infrastructure get stronger? How do we target things that the existing infrastructure doesn't currently target? That's important, right? And so I think that that's something that we, that's part of this process is, what are some of the textiles that are being missed, and what by the existing infrastructure, and how could we leverage their their abilities or their infrastructure to save more, or what could we do to save more? Maybe it's more about raw materials like fabrics and things like that, that are somehow available and being wasted. So that's part of the process, is making sure that the existing reuse and recycling businesses we're hearing from them. So that's why we visited so many of them while I was there.
Laura Pettit mentions in the chat that there's also a real social need in a whole network of secondhand stores, which is very true. There's a social need for things that people can afford in general, and whether it be textiles or anything else. And that's an important thing that the Reuse Innovation Center can add to, as well as the circularity of the economy that Dave mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I wonder if people are trying to log in. Are you able to see that?
Yeah, no, people are popping up, and I'm letting them in as they appear.
So just to reinforce what Laura said, when people were wondering why I was running around Ulster County like just as fast as I possibly could while I was there, I was visiting that network of secondhand stores. I went to 20 of them. I don't know how many I visited, but I was desperately trying to get to all of them so that I could get input from them, so I could analyze them, and we could include them. So the next question was, is this a nonprofit or not-for-profit effort? So I will give you, is there a for-profit model? Yeah, okay. So Tyler, this whole thing is based on our model, which is, there's no limits put on this model. Like if it's going to be a for-profit or a nonprofit or a government run or a completely private run, we will not set a limit at this time on what that will be. The Bellingham Reuse Innovation Center, the first one in Bellingham, Washington, I started that as a private business, and I purchased the property, and the 9 businesses that are involved are all for-profit businesses. In Portland, the Portland Reuse Innovation Center effort revolves around nonprofits and for-profits. And the same is true for a lot of other areas. And the idea of having like a nonprofit involved is critical, because it can help access funding, and people can donate things and stuff like that. And when it comes to workforce development, we're going to get into some of those slides. So, right, Barbara, some of that.
Yeah. Yeah, we should probably move on. Okay, so welcome anybody who's recently gotten in. We very briefly will go over waste characterization, because we don't want to spend a lot of time on it, because we covered that in the last session, and we've made progress to subsequent deliverables in this project that we really want to share with you. So we're then going to go into diversion opportunities and analysis of programs and recommendations, and we absolutely want your feedback too at that point. And then we will talk about the conceptual analysis recommendations for how an RIC might look. And then we'll have some feedback and other questions and adjourn at 1. Okay, Dave.
Okay, I'm gonna have trouble watching the chat, people, so I will do, I know we'll do our best, but so one of the things that we did was we looked at the data that we were handed. I appreciate Ulster County providing that. A lot of the data was from 2018 to 22, and we even got UCRA to provide us some of the the 2022 data, like hot off the presses, so to speak, and finding out like what volume of material is going to the to the dump, and what volume of material is being recycled, and what do they know about the materials, and so we got as much information as we could. We tried to look at what is the infrastructure for handling waste, not just handling diversion, but handling waste itself, meaning mainly in UCRA's case. And how does that work, and how could that work? If you wanted more diversion, what would that look like? So and so then we also looked at, what kind of materials could be diverted, and what relative benefit would that diversion, represent, as far as like, well, if you diverted 2,000 pounds of paper or 2,000 pounds of refrigerators, what kind of benefits would that have when it comes to embodied carbon, embodied energy, and issues like that. So we created some several matrices to help us understand what our priority items are and what the impacts of saving materials are. Next slide.
This is just what it looks like, the waste stream component prioritization matrix, and you can just get an idea of some of the parameters that we looked at, and that Dave, with his expertise, as we assigned values to, in order to come up with a final score per material, which would help inform us greatly about where to put our focus and as far as our efforts in the Reuse Innovation Center.
Right.
Did you want to say anything else about this, Dave? Or
yeah, well, I think that it was, any matrix is going to have its limitations when you are, the materials are so diverse, and you could say, well, we're dealing with doors. Well, what kind of doors? There are all sorts of doors, and so when you really try to put everything into a limited number of categories, then you limit the diversity represented there. Like there are 100 different kinds of doors, and we put them all under one category. Some of them are made of aluminum, some of them are made of wood, some of them are hollow, and some are solid, and so on. So it's really hard to, but if you need some kind of framework to help you think through the process, you have to create that framework and accept its limitations. But so we looked at some of these parameters. Some of the stakeholders informed us on those parameters, and so we tried to include that and give it a vote. Give it a number, and then add that up. And it doesn't mean that something low on the list or anything at this point is being ruled out. Like if you looked at film plastic, which received a really low rating, it doesn't mean that we're ruling it out. In fact, we specifically found options for recycling that. So next slide, I think.
so these were, the ones that rose to the top for the most part, as far as good opportunities. And in part, I mean, some of them are just because they're so easy to resell or to, repair and resell. These are just the best opportunities.
Yeah, and I think one thing we discussed was that there are hundreds of kinds of material, and for the purpose of this study, we didn't have a budget or couldn't conceive of studying hundreds of materials. So we did choose materials. It doesn't mean that every type of material is represented here. In fact, if someone has a particular material that they really care about, we certainly would love to hear about that. But
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, but I think at some point, this is just an exercise to help us understand how things work and how it could work. And then, but when all of the other reuse innovation centers, we don't put any limits on what it can do. Like if it's asked to recycle mattresses, then it will recycle mattresses if the funding and the economics, work out. But but there are certain things that tend to work better than others, we found. So so don't think of it as an exhaustive list, just think of it as a guide. And
Yeah.
we have stakeholders or vendors or whatever that want to be involved, and one of them is really interested in clocks, then we'll involve clocks, apparently, So that's all I had to say about that.
Okay. So what I'd like to hear from anybody and everybody is, do you have any questions about what we just covered or about the project that you have in your mind at this time? Did anything surprise you? And anything else that you'd like to bring up regarding the priority materials that we came up with? Okay, Tyler Miller asks, what is the method of receiving the recycled goods?
Yeah, so, well, here's the thing. We have existing examples, and we never put limits on a project. But the existing examples are that we have a collection system. The 9 different businesses, some of them are on the supply side and some are on the demand side. And so the idea is that if you can collect the material, maybe you get paid to collect it, like you're literally getting paid to take a building down. And therefore, that is a way of collecting material, and that material has to go somewhere. So it gets put into the system. Another way is that someone needs, they have a hauling service and they're already hauling stuff to the dump, to the transfer station, which gets transferred to the dump. And we have an opportunity to retrain them and rework them into a diversion business instead of a garbage business. So, and they then will know what opportunities they have and that they can sell their service as a green hauling service. And so we're trying to repurpose existing infrastructure, waste infrastructure, into diversion infrastructure. So that's part of it. And then, of course, existing businesses frequently have materials dropped off, like the Ithaca reuse business. That's just, their parking lot is designed for like a string of cars that are constantly dropping off materials that people are actively trying not to throw away by dropping them off and making that effort themselves instead of having you come pick them up. So there's often these operations end up with too much material. But on top of all of that, we are really excited to work with UCRA and find ways of collecting materials, with UCRA's help. Maybe that's at UCRA's facility. And I mean, like, combined, our goal is to divert massive amounts of material, and collecting it is a good first step. but really what you do after you collect it is the scary part, you know, like how do you store it and how do you sell it, or where are the markets and what how do you pay for that, and finding people and stuff like that. So that's, I know there's a couple more questions on Barbara. Or...
Well, Laura Pettit points out that clean wood, bikes, doors, and so forth were big sellers in New Paltz. And that's the New Paltz Reuse Center, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, metal may be a tough one. Well, one thing about metal is that, you know, like one of the great things about metal from our standpoint is when people bring us things that are made of metal, if they aren't reusable, we can always recycle them. Our a lot of the reuse centers that we help around, you know, the reuse stores that we help our clients all over North America, they often have a metal bin that they get paid for, even if they can't sell it, they can get paid something for recycling it. But what we do, we're really excited about involving people that do welding, because they could make things out of the metal, even if the metal is in poor shape or something like that. So see, were there any others?
Any other questions from anybody? Comments, materials you're especially interested in? Okay, let's move on then. So now we come to the waste diversion analysis segment of our presentation. Dave, take it away.
Okay. All right, so we created a matrix after we analyzed the waste stream. And I had to create some parameters. And so one of the things we looked at was how much volume did that particular material type represent, as best as we could. And so we looked at volume, we looked at the weight of the material, which still is important. Volume is about filling those trucks, and weight is about how much those trucks can carry when it comes to the trucks that haul things to the landfill, for example. And also weight is important because that's how the materials are quantified, because they go over a scale. And then you have environmental benefits. Like I said, there are different impacts of throwing away 2,000 pounds of wood or 2,000 pounds of aluminum. And then of course there's, you know, other community benefits as well. So we looked at, you know, we tried to come up with a way to, you know, to look at what are the priority materials, in what ways could we divert those materials, and what ways are they already being done in other reuse innovation centers and other reuse stores. We definitely looked at just straight up reuse, which is a door becomes gets used as a door. Upcycling it, where something is you know, it's reused in a different way, or light remanufacturing, which is combined with other materials to create a new product. And so we looked at, of course, what's in place now and what we think is feasible to create based on the materials and the community. We definitely looked at a lot of costs involved and things like that. So, but what we're trying to do is have Ulster County create a circular economy that is full of circular businesses, where people aren't sacrificing, they're making money doing this, and that there could be nonprofits mixed in, and the perfect mix of nonprofit and for-profit to maximize diversion and to maximize community good, community benefits. So, next slide. So
this is an example, I guess, of a relatively large scale diversion.
Yeah. So what I'm glad that we have these examples that I can show you, because we want to tell you that this isn't theoretical. This is something that we're doing now, and we need to absolutely modify it and improve on it for Ulster County. In fact, we're most excited about Ulster County because there's so much enthusiasm and so much potential there that we think that it could be just this amazing model that everyone will look to, and you'll all be very proud of. Now, the Bellingham Reuse Innovation Center, which we use as a lot of examples, we have reached the point where we can do projects like this. This set of buildings, not just this one building, but it's a couple of buildings, they weigh 1 million pounds. What does that look like? It looks like this building. That's what it looks like. You know, 1 million pounds looks like a couple of these buildings. And the thing is, you see well, you can't really see, there's two buildings in this photo. One of them's a little shorter on the right, but you know, we individually, it's very hard to do a project like this. As a team, as a cooperative team, you can take on a project like this where you have multiple managers from multiple businesses and multiple sets of employees that are working together, and you have supply and demand in-house to try and address this, and you have maybe multiple storage options and things like that available. Because between the buildings and what was stored in the buildings, 1 million pounds in a very short amount of time is a lot of material to divert. And so that is one example of the potential of a reuse innovation center in Ulster County. You can get far beyond this level, I believe. Next slide. So we used an example to show you the potential that you can realize in Ulster County. Here is a micro example of that's a mega example. Here's a micro example or whatever. So this is Al's appliance. Al is a single dad taking care of not only his own children, but his niece and nephew. He has a really hard time holding down a regular job because he has such you know, his schedule of taking care of children, it seems to prevent him from having a normal work schedule, and so he needed something else. So the Reuse Innovation Center in Bellingham is offering him space for free initially, so that he can start his appliance repair business at virtually no cost to him, and that he will start repairing appliances and then selling appliances through our showroom, which means he doesn't need to have a showroom. He doesn't need to have a customer base because we have a customer base. And as he grows, then we can adjust his rent or the percentage of what we're taking to make it viable for everyone. So we had an example of a mega project where we had dozens of people involved. We have an example of a micro project where we have one person involved. And he not only will take in appliances and fix them and sell them, but he will fix other people's appliances where they have an existing appliance, they don't want to get rid of it, they want to repair it and return it to their own kitchen or laundry room or whatever. So next slide.
Okay, so to kind of summarize what we learned in our waste diversion analysis, there are some strategies that we think work in overall. It says improve recycling practices. I mean, there's things that the county can do to encourage better recycling and handling of materials. There could be incentives. They could potentially require deconstruction as opposed to demolition for buildings over a certain age, for example, as was done in Portland, Oregon, because deconstruction is a great source of materials. You know, obviously, if you just demolish a building, everything just goes out to, you know, the landfill. But if you deconstruct it, there's a great deal that can then be reused, and that, as Dave can certainly attest. Business development, you know, promotion. I mean, you had a kind of a example of the micro business that Dave just talked about, in ways that business can be promoted within the RIC. As far as the county, I mean, there are grants out there. There could be incubator grants. The county might consider requiring large companies to separate out their reusables. For example, you know, there's a variety of options, things that can be done. Initial focus on building deconstruction and salvage. If you start out the Reuse Innovation Center with a functioning deconstruction business, you start to acquire usable materials day one, and people start, you know, learning how to do that. So you've got skill building, you've got materials coming in that can then feed other incubating businesses or partners. Okay, Dave, do you want to talk about the last three?
Yeah. So the focus is, the interesting thing we found in Ulster County, like every county, is that how much work has been put into creating a collection system for waste, creating a collection system for recyclables. But there isn't any real collection system for reusables, or anything better than just simple recycling. So, and most of it, the infrastructure is just simply like, let's get this stuff out of here. Let's find the most efficient way that we can get this stuff on its way to the landfill. That isn't a criticism of Ulster County. That is a real point that is true in almost every community in North America. So we are looking at, creating a collection system for a diversion system, really. And part of that is like groups like Czech Sammy. Their job isn't just to do hauling, it is to do hauling to divert. And so they look at all of the reusable options in the community. They look at all the recyclable options in the community, and they're a nationwide company that, with a strange name, I guess, but they don't just go straight to the transfer station. They are looking to go everywhere but the transfer station on their way to the transfer station. Okay. And so the other thing is that when you have 9 businesses involved, you don't just have a top-down kind of system where you have one person that's sort of like focused on, diversion or collection, and they're like out there like looking. You have 9 people that are really thinking about their supply chains and like, how are they getting material? Now, they might be getting material from each other, and that's okay, but other times there's just so much more management and so much more so many more eyes on the waste stream in the Reuse Innovation Center model. And so that's exciting. So next slide. And
I think we probably need to go through this fairly quickly, Dave.
Yeah, time-wise, I'm not sure what slide we're on. So as far as the number of slides.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, we use this as an example. There was a high school being taken down. If I hadn't known that, but one of the other 9 businesses knew that, that we could find out about that earlier and we could get ourselves involved earlier, because we are trying to insert ourselves in a waste system. And so we need to get involved early before decisions are made where they absolutely have decided to waste things and there's no way to reverse that decision or to affect it. Thankfully, because we were on top of it as a group, we got involved early in this high school project. It led to 125,000 pounds of materials being diverted in 30 days. There were 25 material types when you think of furniture and appliances and toys and textiles and building materials and school supplies and things like that, all kinds of stuff, electronics, because the Reuse Innovation Center can handle that kind of material. So we did. And we also saved history all at the same time. Hey, very cool. Next slide.
So here are a few just example business opportunities that can come out of particular appliances. And as Dave said before, there's lots more materials that are out there, and there's lots more businesses that are out there. And one of the great things about entrepreneurs is that they come up with new ideas every day that nobody thought of before, but for which there is a need or they can make a need. So this is just, a few ideas to give you an understanding that, the real business examples, we want you to know this is not theoretical. These are things that people can actually do and do successfully. The only reason I'm showing you this great big thing is so that you can get a general idea of the process. So just being quick about it. If you went from left to right, basically you would kind of see a microcosm of our process, starting out with identifying the materials, prioritizing them, figuring out what we could do with them, diversion opportunities, and then, how can we, as Tyler mentioned, how do we collect them? Well, what are the opportunities for collecting the materials? How can we improve on existing collection routes, etc.? And then, is there a business opportunity? Is there a micro business opportunity? What can we do with it? And then some real example businesses, because we're looking into the practicality of the business model for people as well. So potential anchor businesses, this is, this is for an RIC, right? What would be the most important things for an RIC to have? And obviously divert the most usable products. And we've kind of gone through these already, but so you get the idea. Dave, why don't you talk about how interrelated all of these aspects, and these are not even everything that an RIC might do or be involved with, but the fact that they play off of each other and support each other.
Right. Okay, here's the thing. The number one thing you should think of is don't set any limits. Imagine whatever you can imagine. It could be done. If there's someone dedicated to doing it, then it could be done. Now, if it's vegetable oil to create biodiesel, that's being done in other communities. I don't see why it couldn't be done here, like Laura was suggesting. And how would that be a part of the Reuse Innovation Center? Well, it could be, or it could be something where it's a partnering business to the Reuse Innovation Center. So you have you know, just because you have a facility and it has limited or finite space doesn't mean that you can't have relationships with other businesses where you take your fleet of diesel trucks until they get electrified later, you know, that they are running off biodiesel, then, and we're supporting that other sustainable business in the community, even though they're not physically located at the Reuse Innovation Center, because we will have finite space and we can't have everyone there, but we can try and involve everyone there. We can try and promote everyone who's doing sustainable work, because if we become the hub of sustainability in Ulster County, it's really not, it's not me or Barbara, it's all of you and all of everyone's efforts being, you know, recognized and being put out there where all the public can see it and be impressed and find out about things and get, you know, make better choices in their daily lives. And this is just the place they go to learn, the place they go to make a positive impact. The businesses that are involved are in these categories and other categories. This is just a simplified, we could have put 1,000 arrows in there and it'd be so hard to see what the heck was going on. So we just limited it to this to kind of give you a sense of how the businesses all, how they are synergistic, how they work together. They complete each other. They don't compete with each other to some degree. And these arrows are showing how, yeah, where does the furniture maker get their wood, and what do they do with the furniture once they've made it, and things like that. And you know, what happens when someone buys that wood flooring and they don't know how to reinstall it, and things like that. So this shows just some of those comparisons. But training, we almost put training in the middle, because there are so many training opportunities that, and so many benefits to having trainees helping these small businesses out. And so there are at least 7 different industries represented in the Reuse Innovation Center, 7 or 8, and talk about a perfect training opportunity for the young people of Ulster County that haven't decided exactly what they want to do. They just want to do something that helps the world heal. And this is their chance to do that. Next slide.
Okay, so maybe this is a good point to go back and look at some of the comments and questions that we may have missed in the chat first. Yeah, okay, we covered Laura's question, and yeah, Tyler suggested, is it possible to create an online marketplace for the items collected by RIC? I know that we had identified a web presence as one of the primary things that is necessary when you get an RIC up and running. Dave, I don't know if anybody has like sold stuff online, but it's certainly feasible to do so.
Yeah,
Question is,
there's,
you know, what amount of effort and time you'd have to have someone assigned to maintaining the website all the time, you know, that would be, but it's
right.
feasible to do.
So I spent my first 11.5 years in the industry running a brick and mortar store. And then the very first thing I did when I became a consultant is to start a materials exchange, an online marketplace for materials, because guess what? I no longer had a brick and mortar location, and I needed a way to take the supply and match it up with demand. And we were, on our scale, we were very successful because we had a very hands-on approach of, you know, we had an electronic wish list so that people could record their wishes, what essentially capturing demand before we had the supply. And when supply would arrive, then we could go to our wish list and try and match that supply up with the demand, with usually from the job site, because where else would we take it? To my garage, you know? And so we played around with that. And then we've helped several materials exchanges get started, like Recapture It, and we've helped Reaply. There's a group called Reaply that you might have heard of. And so these groups are trying to be that online marketplace. And then there certainly are lots of work has been done on point of sale systems. And when you have a lot of the materials at the Reuse Innovation Center are on consignment, so it really is important to have an inventory system that tracks those materials, and to be able to put them on a website, to be able to have a system where they are tracked and available for people to look at, is important, especially when, during COVID, when people didn't want to go places. So that increased that kind of activity. So.
Okay. And Tyler mentions, I know there's companies online that auction off pallets of returned goods from stores like Walmart and Target at highly discounted rates. Maybe a way to getting rid of a lot of product and bring in funds. You ever try anything like that, Dave?
Yeah, well, we might be the recipient of a pallet. There's actually something a lot of people probably maybe don't even know about. Like if there's a semi truck and it gets in an accident, all of the materials are often written off by the insurance company, and they are very quickly disposed of, or sometimes there are companies that collect that material and try to keep them in use by selling them. And so there's lots of different, times where you can see that I think that we generally try to sell things as individual items, because we don't want people to just buy something cheap and then have it set on their property as like they bought something at auction for $1 and they have 1,000 widgets that they don't even know how to use or what they would use them for, but they got them for $1. So so we've tried to keep not encourage like hoarding kind of activity, but I think that hopefully we would be the destination of some of those pallets of materials that we're trying to keep out of the waste stream.
Any other questions from our audience?
This is Cynthia again. I like to make lots of comments, so hi again. I just wanted to say it was really exciting and inspiring to see the presentation about all of these, £1 million building basically being recycled. And I come from more of the fashion textile world and doing similar work, but it's just really, it's really exciting, and I love all the job creation opportunities. So I'm just following along, feeling excited. That's all.
Great, thank you. We're glad we can inspire. Anybody else? Any questions on diversion?
This is Amy. I've been in and out. You were talking about online resources, and I was wondering if you've ever reached out to like the communities of FreeCycle, or I know there's a lot of people on Craigslist Free and just like very small grassroots stuff of people trying to get this stuff going.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I use Craigslist all the time. A lot of times people are trying to create their own marketplace when Craigslist is like this great collection of such a huge amount of the waste stream, or diversion stream. So we're often using groups like that. We have used FreeCycle. I'm in near a community that focuses on that or has that as an option. And we've posted things before, because there's a point where you kind of overreach and you gather too many things, and you realize that you would be better off giving stuff away for free than continuing to pay rent on it. We often use terms from nature to describe this, and the waste stream is like a river flowing through Ulster County. And our efforts are diversion efforts where we're diverting part of that stream off to the side to benefit the county, just like you would irrigation from a river. You divert part of the river to irrigate and grow food for the county. And so there's that, is kind of like a rough analogy of what we do. And so at times you realize that there's too much material flowing through, and you need to, you only have so much storage capacity, like you would say in a wetland, where you can absorb floodwaters to a certain point before they become damaging. And in our case, we sometimes giving stuff away for free is a way to distribute materials more quickly. And it really is, healthier for the Reuse Innovation Center in the end anyway. It builds up relationships, and it diverts more materials at times of high flow. But we are trying to also help empower people to start for-profit businesses where not everything is free. You're trying to create an alternative to the linear economy, and you're trying to employ as many people as you can and convert them, and transfer them to our way of doing things. So some thoughts.
Okay, so Tyler is asking, is there any actionable steps we can do to help the efforts? And what is the timeline for this project as far as getting built and started? The timeline is very, very variable, because it's possible, based on the model that's chosen, to start in a very modular way and get something small up and running and then go. Or it's possible to plan and build something up from scratch, and all of that really depends on Ulster County. That will be a decision that's kind of made toward the end of, or at the end of this project, which is basically our final report is due in September. So, I can't give you a timeline, but the nice thing about the Reuse Innovation Center is that you can do it in a modular way. You can start small and grow. The programs and businesses that you're able to accommodate and work with, and it doesn't have to necessarily take a long time depending on how it's gone about.
Yeah. So I want to say to Tyler, to everyone listening, that it's so critical that you're here, and so critical that that you are asking questions like, is there anything we can do? Is there any steps that that we can do to help these efforts? The first thing is, we already know that there's a waste stream, and we know that there are materials in the waste stream that have value, and that the only reason they're not valued is that there isn't someone who's capturing those materials and adding value to them by just simply capturing them, or advertising them, or cleaning them up, or forming them into a new product like fabric into clothing. What does that take? It takes people. We cannot just think our way through this. We cannot talk our way through this. We cannot regulate our way through this. We need people to get involved who are willing to kind of stick their neck out a little bit and start a business. And maybe that business is a part-time thing that they do on the weekends while they still have their day job. But we need to find those people. We need to find those young people. We need to find any people, retired people, it doesn't matter, who are willing to join this effort in some small way or big way. And we need to capture those people and then work with them to move this forward. Like today, if I had a demolition contractor that would call me after this meeting and say, I want to learn how to deconstruct, we wouldn't have to wait for a Reuse Innovation Center for them to do that. I could train them tomorrow, and they could be saving material by Friday. So help us find those people. That is so critical. All of this work that we've done so far is great, but we need to find those people to actually implement this.
Okay, we're a little behind schedule at this point, so let's move on to the next segment, which is our conceptualization evaluation of how can we make this thing happen? What's important? So number one, order matters. What order you start developing the participants in the RIC matters. It matters that there be skilled workers to be involved in this work. It matters that we kind of start with deconstruction because that Dave can talk about the importance of that. But as I mentioned earlier, it's, as it says, a fast material source and stable business model. So if you start with deconstruction, you're bringing in materials, which then can feed other businesses or programs associated with the RIC. So that's number one. And if that's going to help pay the rent, that's, really helpful. And people can then learn how to do deconstruction. It's a different set of skills and quite a varied set of skills, as opposed to just, destroying a building, actually taking it apart in such a way that the pieces can be reused and stored and trucked and taken care of appropriately, etc. Location matters a lot, not just because of zoning, but because of accessibility. We are definitely thinking that wherever we locate an RIC, it should be within 20 minutes of Accra. That's kind of an idea that we came up with, or that's what Dave suggests, and I defer to his expertise. And I talked about modularity and physical characteristics. That's something we're getting into more, and that we'll talk about more in the next session. The siting considerations and what it should look like. But we do have that conceptualization that we showed earlier from Dave.
Yeah.
Which is just one possible visual model.
Yeah, that's right.
Go ahead, Dave.
Of the 200 businesses we've helped, they've all had to adapt. They've all had to sacrifice. They've all had to compromise because they didn't have the funding, or they just didn't have the revenue, or they didn't have the infrastructure, whatever. And so they have sacrificed. Now, Ulster County has an opportunity to provide a facility and to make it limit the amount of sacrifice and compromise that we have to do. But we are looking, when we look for a project, just a quick summary would be, yeah, we love having indoor space that's heated, but we also like outdoor covered space. We love even to have just a gravel lot where we can put stacks of bricks in the rain. Who cares if they get wet, right? We need a staging room to bring things in, and a big warehouse space to store, to sell things out of. And we've got all those things I showed you, like the repair station and the tool library and a showroom that's fancy and well lit and lower ceilings and things like that. We've got our work areas, we've got our recycling area, we've got our flexible storage area, which is great because you never know what's coming in. If you want to act like a wetland, you have to have the storage capacity to accept high flows of waste when they come to you, and then be able to discharge that back into the community as opposed to the landfill. And there are other things that are obvious, like bathroom and loading dock, stuff like that. But hey, sometimes you have to do without some of those things. And we're all about adaptive reuse of buildings. We're also about understanding what it's like to sacrifice, or what to do with less, as you just can't afford everything that a new business can, because you're not subsidized by the environment like Home Depot is, where they seem to be a successful business, but they're drawing their success from the environment and to everyone's detriment. So next slide.
And this is the same one we saw before, but just now that you've been through a lot of this orientation and discussion, it makes a little more sense maybe. in terms of what Dave just talked about.
Yeah, and it does take a lot of space because you're taking in, I want you to imagine this, and this will help understand. You're taking in every material that was ever produced over the last 200 years, every single material that has ever been produced, like clothing and books and building materials and appliances, and of every model and size and color and shape and weight, and they're all, over time you're going to get all of those materials, and it's very hard to have a small space and to be able to accurately and properly display those materials in that kind of diverse space of materials in a small location. But big locations cost a lot of money, so that is the problem for most reuse business. They need the space and they can't afford it. So next slide. So people say, why do you choose deconstruction as a starting point? Here's the thing about deconstruction. Deconstruction is a service. It isn't just collection, it is a service that generates a byproduct of reusable and recyclable materials. You are getting paid to do the deconstruction. You are getting paid to haul that recyclable material to the recycling yard. You're getting paid to haul those reusable materials to the Reuse Innovation Center. That means that it is a product that is being generated, being delivered to the Reuse Innovation Center essentially for free, because the deconstruction company is getting paid to do that. And that is why it is a very viable option. A lot of thrift stores are similar in that they receive, clothing and books or something like that for free. But this is an opportunity to do massive amounts of diversion, and that's the structure that allows that to happen. So, so we start with something like that, and we start with some anchor operations, and we get a framework going where we're starting to pay the bills, and we have, the business management necessary to achieve that and beyond. And then we start to bring in the other partnering businesses. Once there's a great selection of materials for artists and craftspeople to choose from, then they can start creating their products out of that, eventually moving on to things that are even more exciting, like repairing materials. There's so many things that a repair business can do at the RIC, even just pulling nails or, like processing materials that they would hopefully be, 24/7 repair instead of just one weekend a month. And so we hope that that will appeal to the community, but it's not going to be free. It's going to have a cost. So, and then the workforce training is very exciting, because if we want to move the circular economy forward, we need to move people into the circular economy, like workers. Next slide.
So these are just a few of the dependencies that we have to consider. Site availability obviously is a constantly changing thing, right? Because people are buying and selling and leasing real estate every day, and we might be looking at a site. If we start looking at a site now, in 6 months or a year, it's not going to be there anymore, most likely. So, that's something that has to be dealt with when the time is right. Funding is something we're looking at. There are grants, there are, other potential sources of funding, and whether or not the state can pitch in, whether or not the county can help fund it, that's also a legislative question. And of course, regulatory requirements, we're not looking at dealing with materials that require a lot of complex processing or that are heavily regulated. We really don't want to involve the RIC in all of that sort of burdensome regulation. And so we're not going to be making road materials on some large scale manufacturing thing. We're not going to be doing that sort of stuff. That's at least our recommendation. So to summarize, we know there's lots of waste. We know what to do with it. We've got excellent models in terms of real reuse innovation centers, as well as many, many businesses that, divert materials now all over the country that Dave has worked with or is part of his, or are part of his Bellingham Reuse Innovation Center or other reuse innovation centers, or just operate on their own now, but might benefit greatly from working with others in a complementary way. We've identified priority materials. We have a diversion strategies for those materials, and some other ideas that we came up with in terms of diversion strategies. How do we get the materials? Do we work with haulers before stuff, for stuff that doesn't even ever get to UCRA? Do we possibly set up collection, for things at UCRA before it gets to the tipping floor? I mean, this is all something to discuss and to think about, and that's entirely up to UCRA and Ulster County. But these are ideas that we were talking about. Education and incentives for contractors, obviously, I've talked to people, Dave's talked to people. There is definitely a dearth of skill set for deconstruction, and that training would have to happen. The great thing is that you can learn the beginnings and work your way up and continue to learn over a long period of time. So that's a great opportunity in terms of education and job creation. Working with dedicated collection businesses. And then we talked about the different types of diversion that can happen, and really, as far as the variety of businesses that are possible, there's many, many of them. So that brings us mostly to the end, almost to the end. And on the last slide after this is our contact information. So anybody have any other questions? I'll also mention for the next session, July 11th, we're going to talk more about the conceptual plan as it becomes more finalized, and siting considerations, which we will have delved more deeply into by then. On August 1st, there will be an emphasis on business opportunities for entrepreneurs. So certainly, if you know anybody who fits into that category, or even just other stakeholders or people in Ulster County that, will want to hear about this, by all means, that, Taylor, is something you can do. You can invite people to join the upcoming sessions, and definitely write and let us know any thoughts you may have, any ideas you may have about the Reuse Innovation Center. We want to know if you support this. We want to know what you'd like to see it do. So by all means, let us know. Any other questions, thoughts from anybody?
Yeah,
Hi
that,
again. Oh,
go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was wondering if it's going to be possible to get, this has been really interesting, and it would be cool to be able to get a recording of this. I know you're recording of it. Is there going to be a link later?
Yes, hopefully we'll put a link on our page on our website now that we've finally gotten a decent recording of one of these sessions. Yeah, we had a little technical difficulties in the previous ones, but yes, we will absolutely share this. And we can send a link to everybody who signed up for this session once it's up there. Anybody else? Okay, I think we're there.
Thanks everybody for coming. It's
I
great.
will put this into the chat just in case anybody still wants our contact info but didn't get it yet. Well, that almost posted right, but not quite.
So while you do that, I'll just say that, you know, in Wisconsin, what we're planning is called a waste recovery park, and it is taking, as though, you know, the reuse store became the reuse innovation center, and then the reuse innovation center became the waste recovery park, and that's where the reuse innovation center joins other businesses that are diverting materials through composting and various other things like that. And so I think Ulster County will soon, if they're not already they're a leader, but I think that with these kind of actions like the Reuse Innovation Center, they will be looked at as a model for the rest of North America to follow. You know, the mattress recycling efforts that are start up at UCRA, at the Reuse Innovation Center, the fact that they're already doing so much composting and avoiding, you know, straws and all kinds of things like that. I mean, it's all so necessary, and somebody has to do it. You know, somebody has to take the step and make it work, and then so others can follow that. And I think a lot of people are honestly going to be watching what happens here in Ulster County and waiting to see you succeed before they take the leap. So it's really important.
Yeah, that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Amy, Laura, Greg?
This was very, very cool. Thank you so much for including us.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Okay. Moving on.
Moving on. All right. Thanks, folks.
All right.
Have a great day.
Now we'll
Hope
talk
to
to
see
you
you the
all
next
later.
time.
Yeah, catch you next time. Hopefully we'll see you then.